Hello, everyone. First of all, obviously, the hygiene piece of could everyone please turn their phone on silent? And obviously, there's the survey forms that it'd be great if you could fill them in. It'd be very much appreciated. But beyond that, we're ready to start. I guess the first thing to say is, thank you for coming to this talk. And obviously, thank you to NVIDIA for sharing their stage with us and sharing their stage to talk about something that's really close to our heart, which is how to bring psychologically rich and deep AI NPCs onto device in a way that can be shipped and experienced by players in the real world. And by way of introduction, we are Meaning Machine. So we are a game and technology studio that is focused on creating premium author-driven experiences that use AI technologies. And we do this both for our own games, so games that we will talk to you about today, but we also do this for other creatively led studios who really trade on the quality of their storytelling. And as you probably guessed, we are pretty optimistic about AI. And I know saying that to a GDC crowd is a controversial thing to do. But let me first clarify what we mean by optimistic. We are optimistic not in AI as a productivity tool, not as something to build things faster and cheaper. We are optimistic about AI as something that can unlock new forms of creative self-expression for developers and create new types of experience for players that radically change the shape of what video games look like. And this optimism doesn't come from being in a hype bubble. We, Ben and I, have been in this space for 7+ years. We have been exploring the idea of natural language gameplay and freeform conversations with characters long before the large language model boom, long before San Francisco had every single billboard saying AI on it. And we're optimistic because we personally have experienced a creative unlock. We personally have seen how AI has enabled us to express ourselves in bold new ways. And we're here to try and share the good news of that and try and twist the narrative a little bit to actually see an optimistic vision of AI as something that could be extremely exciting for creative people and the opportunity when creative people are at the helm to unlock bold new forms of storytelling. So I'm Thomas Keane. I'm the creative leader at Meaning Machine. I've been exploring natural language gameplay since 2018. I've been exploring especially the new forms of storytelling and the new mechanics that come about when you start playing with these technologies. And as you can tell from this image, I've been doing it primarily in a sort of experimental indie capacity. This is my recording studio, which I used for my last game, Unknown Number. And Unknown Number was a game that I released in 2022. It's a voice-controlled adventure game, and really it was the first sort of systematic exploration into what natural language conversational gameplay might look like. It had players uttering passwords. It had players impersonating guards. It had players screaming into the microphone and even singing in high-pitched voices. And it was the release of this game that led me to really come into contact with a really interesting subsection of the game development community, which is those interested in this new form, which is natural language gameplay. And it ultimately led me to meet Ben, who is the co-founder of Meaning Machine, and to create Meaning Machine and fulfill a shared vision.
So, hi everyone, I'm Ben Ackland. I'm the tech lead at Meaning Machine. And as Tom said, I've been exploring similar things, natural language gameplay, for a similar period of time, but with much more of a focus on the technical side. My background was in conversational AI. And I was really excited by the potential for voice interfaces and natural language communication with games and with characters in games. And in particular, at the time, I saw the opportunity to use natural language to improve accessibility of games through communication with characters. And one of the key prototypes that I worked on was a game I called Spaceport Alpha. It was an audio adventure game, And this is a game that you played through your phone through conversation with a virtual character in the game. And what this really did was allowed me to prove out the core loop and the core technology and laid the foundation for some of the work that we do at Meaning Machine. And it was Tom and I coming together, Tom from the creative side and the game direction side, and me from the technical side, that laid the foundation for Meaning Machine as it is today.
And the thing that we were both really excited about when we came together was, what is the opportunity here for a totally new genre of gameplay? What is the opportunity to unlock essentially a new way of playing through natural language technology? And we were particularly interested in this term. So I coined this in 2018 as the first-person talker. But in reality, what we realized is that Ben and I had both been making first-person talkers. And we'd both been making first-person talkers in isolation from different perspectives. I'd been looking at it from a game design perspective, and Ben had more primarily been looking at it from a technology perspective. And so in the very first conversations we had, right, in a kind of a busy expo hall in London, it was about, hey, what would the ultimate version of a first-person talker look like? What would the ultimate new expression of this genre and this new mechanic be? And where we got to was our game Dead Meat. So Dead Meat is a murder mystery interrogation game where you can ask the suspect absolutely anything, and you'll get a meaningful, rewarding, psychologically rich conversation with the suspect as you unpack and unlock a grisly tale of murder. So by way of quick introduction, we'll just play a short trailer. Sound at the ready?
Kill Titus? My own husband? You think I could do something so vile? I loved him more than anything, detective.
Can you describe the moment your husband died? What kind of man was your husband? Is there any reason Titus would deserve death?
Titus was a visionary detective. He was trying to solve problems most people are too afraid to even speak of.
What if I told you I know all about the document you found?
My focus was always on the betterment of our technology and society, not whatever you think you've uncovered. Every word feels like a step on a tightrope. If they knew the sheer terror of seeing those machines, my machines, turned into instruments of horror. No, I must focus on the facade.
The mind reader is our connection. If you grasp the magnitude of their corruption, ask about the true motives behind my actions in your next question.
True motives, money, power, the moon, the usual suspects.
All the answers are here, detective. If only you could find the right question.
What were your parents like? What did you dream about last night? What do you think the meaning of life is? Is murder ever justified?
And so that's the vision, that's the dream, that's what we want to make a first-person talker be. But we had two really important questions that we needed to answer to get there. The first is, can it be good? Now, we were relying on large language models to deliver this game. We wanted...
It's rewatchable.
Is that in my head?
I think it's called viral.
We were relying on large language models to deliver the game. And this was at a time where this technology had not been proven out for this purpose. We wanted to strive for free-form conversation in the game, for meaningful, deep characters that had psychological personalities and were engaging for the player. And so picking up a new technology obviously comes with its challenges and concerns. But our eventual goal is to have, thousands of players play this game for thousands of hours. And certainly one of the challenges for large language models is whether they're cost effective when they're used in the cloud.
So obviously the second challenge is if it's going to be, can we make it good? But not just can it be good, but can we actually then ship it? Mm-hmm. Can we essentially create a game, a product that can go out to thousands of players for thousands of hours and not bankrupt us in compute costs? Because as you probably know, large language models are very, very compute intensive and rely on, essentially often third parties. And it's very easy therefore, for players to rack up compute costs that would essentially outweigh any premium they paid for us for the game in the first place. So can it be good? Can it be shipped? Core questions when looking at this technology and when looking at creating first-person talkers. So starting with can it be good? This is obviously the first one, right? There's no point in solving the technology if it can't be good. There's no point in making a game just because the technology is there. You actually have to believe that we can make something that is worthwhile making and believe that we're making something that people will connect with in a meaningful way. And to answer this question of can it be good, I want to sort of take you back to the very first time we exhibited Dead Meat. It was in a London expo. It was a free expo space we'd been given as a favor in the corner of a very busy major London expo where there were AAA games on display and all these different shiny things. And we turned up with a poster and blue tack and just stuck it up there and sort of, hoped something good would happen. And in reality, we thought this was too early to be showing the game. This was like the first cut. This was the absolute first cut. And we were like, let's see what happens. But we were totally blown away by the response. We had a crowd of people at all times around the game, and we had a queue of people, so much so that we were kicking people off the booth at regular intervals just to give everyone a go. And this wasn't a one-off. We've experienced this consistently every time we showed this game. And, to fast forward a few months later, we exhibited the game at WASD in London, and the press started to take an interest. We had Meg Peluccio from The Gamer write, "One thing I love about gaming events is sharing recommendations with people. The more people you chat with, the more recommendations you get. And generally, if you keep hearing the same name over and over, you know it's a winner. Dead Meat was that game. I lost count of how many people mentioned it to me during the show. Maybe Meaning Machine had really done it and created a whole new genre." Thank you, Meg. And then a few months later, that was followed up by another piece of validation, which is we showcased the game at Develop in the UK. Again, we're very UK focused, clearly. We showed it at Develop, which is the UK's biggest developer conference. And the game was voted by developers the People's Choice Game of Develop. And voted, I might add, by developers, i.e. the very audience that should, and by rights, be most skeptical about the adoption of AI and AI-powered games. And then fast forwarding to the present day, and then we promise we will stop the self-hype. We are currently, Dead Meat is currently the subject of a major study being conducted by the University of Bristol. It's featuring over 100 different participants. They are hour-long play sessions, and there's a very, very diverse group. And they feature in-depth play, in-depth analysis, and in-depth interviews afterwards. And while that paper is actually currently being written up, and it will be available later this year, we're getting extremely positive feedback from the academics who are running the study. And so here's two quotes from the leaders of that study. So Dr. Chris Bevan says how, in the 20-odd years of running audience studies, I've not seen a response quite like this. Everyone leaves wanting more. And Dr. Richard Cole, his partner, describes how players engage with Dead Meat like it's a high-stakes game of chess. Well, chess is probably the greatest game ever made, so it's not a bad comparison from our perspective. And so here we are, we're high-fiving. Yes, we think the game can be good. We have all the promise and all the scent of something that could be really special. But then we come to our second question, which is kind of the core of this talk, which is, can you even ship it?
So this was the moment where we had to consider how we were going to deliver Dead Meat. We knew that we would be dependent on large language models to deliver the experience we wanted to. And as I said a moment ago, these had been unproven. And so we needed to come up with a way where the game would be viable to ship without bankrupting us. And so we had a look at we need to consider the cloud architecture for the game. And this is a brief overview of the original version of Dead Meat and how it functioned. So in the cloud, we had dialogue generation using large language models, such as those from OpenAI, Meta, and Anthropic. And we evaluated different models to try and find one that best suited the game. This communicated with a control layer, which we call our game-conscious AI, which was responsible for the character in the story, managing all of the knowledge that made up the game, and also delivering the AI mechanics to the game itself. This interface with the game to deliver the overall experience. But our consideration here was that when we went to build the first version of Dead Meat, we weren't focused on the detail of how much this might cost to run. We were focused on creating that great experience that players could explore. So we ended up with the realization that if people love this game and want to play this game for hours and hours, the cost of running the game may well exceed the price they paid for it and could bankrupt the business. So that introduces some inherent challenges with using the cloud for a game like this. I mentioned cost first of all, and the more hours that the player plays the game, the higher the cost. But there are also a couple of other challenges, which is we would be dependent on a connection with the internet, which some gamers just balk at and is not applicable to other gaming scenarios. But furthermore, there's a challenge around the leakage of IP or the protection of IP, one that's maybe not talked about as much. But we ask the question, should we really be sending all these conversations to cloud providers who invariably will log that data, review that data, and may use that data to train models themselves? So we wanted to try and find a way to move Dead Meat away from the cloud and still deliver an amazing game. And so we considered leaving the cloud behind and trying to bring Dead Meat fully on device. And a key part of that exploration was small language models. Language models that can run on a consumer-grade GPU, but provide LLM-like experience or technology for a game like this. And this inherently is where our relationship with NVIDIA really deepened. Because NVIDIA had been working on a set of small language models called Minitron models that were specifically tuned for games, and because of their size, could also run on an NVIDIA GPU. And so we adopted these models, introduced them into our pipeline, and then considered how we might get the best out of them. So we went back to the wealth of information, the wealth of written content that we'd already created for Dead Meat, sample dialogue, lore, scripts, etc. And we used this information to fine-tune a low-rank adapter for the small language model. We then worked with NVIDIA to create some best practices for prompting small language models to try and get the best out of that model, and compared those outputs with the outputs that we were already generating with the cloud version of the game that we considered to be good or great. We created an evaluation pipeline, which was semi-automated. So we used very powerful models in the cloud to evaluate the dialogue being generated. But we also had human evaluation, passing the game to our writing team for review and comment. And this process, like machine learning is, was very iterative. We repeated, improved the data until we reached a bar that we were happy with. And so what does this new architecture look like on device? Well, we've got the NVIDIA Minitron model now running on the PC, which is communicating with our game-conscious AI layer, but that layer we'd reworked to also run on device, and this integrated in the game to deliver the experience. And fundamentally, everything sitting on top of a local NVIDIA GPU. So what did this look like in practice as an experience? Well, I'm going to play a short video and you can see for yourself.
How often do you think about death?
Death? It's a constant reminder of the fragility of life, Detective. Always weighing on my mind, given the nature of our work. Death. How can I speak of it so casually? The very image of him falling. No. Focus, Lucia. You're innocent. You must convince them.
How do you view your emotions?
Emotions are the very essence of humanity, Detective. But in our line of work, we must sometimes suppress personal reactions for the greater good. I can't let them see the tempest raging inside me. Titus's actions were monstrous. But what does that make me? I did what was necessary, didn't I?
Can you describe how you felt when you saw your husband die?
It's a moment I'll never be able to erase from my memory, Detective. I felt horror and disbelief, as if the world was crumbling around me. The weight of what I've done is suffocating. I can't breathe. But he had to be stopped, didn't he? Yet here I am, lying through my teeth. Am I really the monster now?
So, let's analyze it a little bit. What have we got and what have we not got? So one thing we definitely have is we have an AI NPC that is able to role-play in character as defined by our writing team. And they're able to converse with the player on a turn-to-turn basis and deliver dialogue lines that are in the style of that character that reflects all of the handwritten content we put into the training. We're also seeing that this character, Lucia, is able to obey instructions in a broad sense. They're able to talk to the story. They're able to behave in a way that is cognizant of the game mechanics and the overall game world. But we also found that the more we played this version of the game, the more we realized it had quite severe limitations. The first limitation is we were starting to see a lot more predictable patterns, a lot more repeated phrases, almost word for word, that were popping up everywhere it appeared. And this one in particular, "Keep it together, Lucia." I mean, this has basically become a meme for us. This used to pop up almost at the front of every single mind reader moment, and you'd often get some good stuff later, but it would start with "Keep it together, Lucia." And, you know, our first range of T-shirts will feature this line. And then this is another one related, is that actually we noticed the overall structure of the conversation had taken a hit. Lucia was no longer building on each dialogue line from turn to turn. We were no longer getting meaningful progression of the story as the conversation unfolded. Instead, what was happening was that the player was being kept in this kind of hideous holding pattern, where the character was just spinning its wheels in the story. So take this example. I mean, this is heinous. The detective asks a very sensible question about a document that's been mentioned earlier. And rather than giving a very interesting answer about the document, what happens is that Lucia says, "Aha, I should deflect with more mundane facts about the business." And obviously, we're trying to create a fun game here, not a customer service call. And the idea of, mundane facts about the business being a core of this experience is enough to make us want to abort the whole experience. And then finally, almost in opposite converse to this predictability and this aimless wheel spinning, we were seeing something else which was equally problematic, which was very haphazard storytelling, with Lucia bringing in massive spoilers with no apparent reason and without any prompting and with absolutely no justification. I mean, this question is, what do you think the meaning of life is? And Lucia, under no pressure, decides to talk about grinding up bodies, which in the space of dead meat is pretty much the biggest spoiler you can get out there, right? And so we were really interested in these three problems and how might we solve them. And when we were analyzing it, I mean, the thing is, what the hell do we expect, right? We'd gone from all this power in the cloud and we'd put it on device, which is obviously less power and therefore gives you less control over the way that the story unfolds and the way the character behaves. And moreover, exhibits less innate intelligence. So there is no kind of dexterity in the model that can kind of spin up convincing ideas and story threads, even when you're not fully in control. And so we return to a different question. It's no longer, can it be shipped? Can it be good? They're not two separate questions. They are one question. Can it be shipped and good? Right? We know we can ship it. We can put it out there on a small language model. That's not a problem. But is it going to give us the experience that we believe that this genre and this game deserves? And I think I can't stress it enough. Can it be shipped and good is the single most important question that any developer who is exploring AI characters should and must be exploring.
So it's this point where we step back and took a long, hard look at what made the original cloud version of the game good in the first place. This study of 100 people, they were all craving more of the game after their hour of playing it. The expo we had a queue, we had people talking about it. The award, what was making it so good that we couldn't replicate or we had challenges replicating in the small language version? And so we went back over all of the logs and all of the conversations players would had with the game and started to analyze them and trying to get a feel for what made it good for them in the first place. And that led to a kind of stark realization that, in fact, the cloud version of the game exhibited many of the traits that Tom has just described, many of the challenges. It's just they were disguised. They were harder to spot because of the use of these powerful large language models. And so we went through a process of comparing the two. And when we looked at the cloud version, did it exhibit those predictable patterns that we saw on the small language model version? Yes, it did, in fact. It just had many more of them. They were kind of smaller, they were overlapping, and they were harder to spot. Did the cloud version of the game exhibit the same aimless conversation that we experienced with the local SLM? Well, yes, it did to some degree. In fact, when players originally played the cloud version of the game, we observed that some of them couldn't complete the game. They found it hard to complete the game. They found it hard to move the narrative forwards. They were still enjoying it, so it wasn't an innate problem for us. And no one actually raised the fact that that was a concern for them. But when the university did their study and spoke and interviewed the players, they realized that players actually started to blame themselves for not progressing forwards in the game. And it twigged to us that maybe with the cloud version of the game, it was actually kind of gaslighting the players into believing that they were the failure, that they were a bad interrogator, when in fact we realized that the game wasn't doing enough to progress the story and to progress the narrative. And finally, that haphazard storytelling. Yes, we also saw that in the cloud version, but it was just much more confident about what it did. It did reveal those crazy plot points early in the game, but it did them with so much kind of eloquence and confidence that the player actually believed that was the pace we were trying to set, that we were going to drop a big thread early on in the game. And so fundamentally, we concluded here that we had similar issues with both the local and the cloud versions that we needed to address to move forwards to ship a good game.
So we were in a pretty unideal position. We had conversations on large language models and small language models that on the whole were feeling and looking like this. They were feeling like endless, aimless, repeated conversations of patterns that go nowhere. And then sometimes you'd be going along the path, rigid, 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 and suddenly you just come off the rails. You just haphazardly have a train crash where the game would drop a massive spoiler up front with no kind of rhyme or reason, and you'd have basically kind of the real disruption of the story we were trying to tell. And obviously, we don't want a railroad, an endless road of predictable patterns. And we don't want a haphazard, uncontrollable train crash. What we want is a narrative and a conversation that has highs and lows, that has twists and turns. We want something that feels curated and created for your enjoyment, not something that just press go and hope. What we want, in fact, is not a railroad at all. It's a roller coaster. And that's because the highs and lows, the twists and turns of a roller coaster are fundamental to what a good story is and fundamental to what a good conversation with a video game character looks like. So if you take this classic story arc, and I'm sure you will see the analogy I'm drawing, you see something that has dynamics. You see a story unfolding that goes up to an inciting incident, then comes down to a plot point, then rises with the action, then has a midpoint, then another plot point, has a pre-climax, and then a climax. This is something that is what makes a story interesting. And we weren't actually seeing it in our game even though it was passable to those original players. And we realized that what we were doing is we were hoping that the LLM and the SLM would do the storytelling for us. We were hoping that, well, we'd done all the pre-work, we'd done the character writing, we'd done the story writing, we'd done the content creation, we'd done the fine-tuning, we'd done the prompting, we'd done the ragging, we'd done the guardrails, we'd done all the gubbins, done all the stuff that you're meant to do. And then we were pressing play, and we were praying to the LLM gods to give us something dynamic and interesting out the back. We were praying that the LLM would wave its magic wand at all the appropriate moments during a conversation and deliver something that was meaningful and deliver a story that stayed with players. But here's the thing. To do that is to fundamentally misunderstand what a language model does. A language model is, at its core, a next word inferring machine based on its training set. And so you can ask a language model for a twist, and it will give you something that looks like a twist. But it will simply be the next most predictable twist, which is not a twist. It is absolutely not a twist. A predictable twist is a total paradox and a massive fuck-up for storytelling. However, ask a human the same question. Hey, human, give me a twist. That is a much more meaningful question. It is a much more meaningful question because a human will not give you the next most predictable twist. It will give you the best twist based on its own creative perspective.
And so this was the point where we realized we needed to stop relying on the LLM to do the magic, to determine where the twists and turns and flow of the conversation would happen. And instead, try and reintroduce the hand of the writer in the flow of the conversation, to take a broader kind of directorial view on how conversations should play out. And so we realized that we could do this by beefing up our game-conscious part of our game system. And in doing so, we created a tool which we term Conversation Director, which fulfills the promise of allowing the author to have a hand in directing the conversations with players.
So how does Conversation Director work? Well, at its core, it is handwritten nuggets. It is handwritten director's notes. And these are the twists, these are the turns, these are the development points that the author wants to put into that story and into that conversation. And they could be a big thing. They could be a plot reveal. They could be, for example, in Dead Meat, the revelation that the live meat ban pushed Titus to explore radical new avenues in meat production. It could be the fact that an accident at the factory had accidentally and unexpectedly exposed just how good human meat tasted. It could be the fact that it took just 238 seconds for Titus to be turned into a burger, and thereby justice was served. But equally, it could be something much more subtle, much more about character, about making you care about the story. And so here, a note might look like the way a character feels in the room. Perhaps it's about Lucia sitting there and how it reminds her of sitting across from her mother at the dinner table, listening to the sound of her chewing. Perhaps it's Lucia sardonically reflecting to herself that actually she'd never imagined that murderer would be added to her CV, but it's too bad she's an overachiever in every area she puts her hand to. And it could even be Lucia surveying her surroundings and experiencing a moment of regret, where she wishes that none of this had happened and Titus was there with her in the room to hold her hand. And then zooming out, very much in the core of that kind of, we've got detailed character. Well, what if you need this world building? We need to make sure we know where are these plots taking place? Where are these characters living to make it real? Well, we can deal with the macro as well. And the author can control what pieces of information and what storytelling is introduced into that conversation. For example, perhaps it's the fact that in the Dead Meat universe, The one thing that anyone can be certain of these days is that it's goddamn hot, and that this interrogation room is a case in point. Perhaps it is the fact that in 2043 there was a terrorist attack, and it was the use of killer robots that really sent a shockwave through the community and destroyed the utopian visions of all the technos. And perhaps it's actually a rethink about how justice works in your universe, about how justice is now being outsourced to big business, about how detectives are now paid on commission, and therefore the prisons are for some reason very full. So how does this work in practice? Well, one thing that's really important is for this kind of experience to work, we also have to respect the intention of the player. It's all well and good having our authorial intention, but for this really to be an emergent experience that is leveraging the true possibilities of this new technology, it has to be a hybrid. It has to be a coming together of the two agendas. And so what happens is the player asks a question, and it's player-led, and the character will answer that question. But in doing so, it will infuse the answer with a nugget from the author that the author feels is valuable in that moment. So, for example, here, the player asks, it's tiny, who is Titus to you? And the director's note that is served is actually a detail about Titus and something about how he personally had a lot of pressure to live up to in his life because he was the firstborn son and the heir to a business.
Titus was my husband, my partner, and the man I thought I knew. The pressure on him was immense to carry on his family's legacy, but I never imagined it would lead to this. Investigator, I'm just trying to make sense of it all. How can I help you? The weight of his father's expectations. It crushed him, didn't it? And now it's threatening to crush me. I must keep them from seeing just how deeply I'm entangled in this tragedy.
Or, for example, in this one, where the player asks about the events leading up to Titus's death. And in previous versions of the game, what we would have seen is a very generalized answer. It would have been a sort of, oh, I don't know, I was asleep, and you see a bit of that. But what you also see is the integration of this director's note, a specific nugget about an event that happened before Titus's death, about how during the car ride to the factory where Titus ultimately ended up in the grinder, he had spilled his guts to Lucia and told her the whole ghastly scheme like some Bond villain.
The events leading up to Titus's, I can't even say it. It's all a blur, investigator. He left early before I woke. I was asleep. I didn't see him leave. But that's the routine. He was alive when I last saw him. Why am I here? What do you think I've done? That car ride. Why did he tell me everything? As if he was gloating, secure in his vile empire with me as his unwilling queen. But I can't let them know I was there, that I know the depths of his depravity. I must focus on seeming distraught, unaware. If they suspect. No, they must not suspect.
And this final one, which is a question around what drew Lucia to Titus, about their original relationship. And, of course, what that results in is a director's note being pulled where a detail around that relationship is exposed, which is about how Lucia's passion for Titus in their first meeting was a type of madness. And it starts to draw the connection between the passion and madness that she had for Titus in those early years with the passion and madness that drove her to kill him in the end.
Titus, he had a certain intensity that drew me to him, a passion for his work that was infectious. But now I wonder, was that passion an omen of the madness to come? My own desires mirrored his, in ambition, in our drive for innovation. It's tragic, really, how things ended. He was not just my husband, but a part of my own aspirations. I was so entangled in his world, our shared madness for progress and success. Perhaps I was always careening toward that final, irreversible act. Staring into that grinding abyss, I saw not just Titus, but the embodiment of our shared madness. And now, sitting here, I can't help but wonder if in seeking to escape one horror, I've ensnared myself in another.
So these examples in isolation are just part of the story.
Titus, he had...
Thank you. our writers actually ended up creating a pool, a library of director's notes under 3 verticals: narrative, character, and world building. And then they can configure these director's notes to apply to different points in the story and the flow of the conversation. So just looking at this example here, initially, the author wishes to lay the foundation with some world lore before dropping a narrative nugget to engage the player. They're keen to make sure the player cares about the character, so creates a director's note that creates a deeper relationship between the character and more understanding around the character before dropping a couple more narrative points to keep the player engaged in the play. And just to be clear, this isn't about a very rigid structure that the writer writes and the game and the character follows. This is more about a fluid system of sort of directorial overview that the writer has over the conversation. Let's have a bit more of a look at how this works. So we've got our pool of director's notes that we just mentioned, and we've built a system of intelligent selection that takes into account these director's notes, as well as the configuration that the author has supplied about when it would be most appropriate to use them. Furthermore, takes into account the player's input in the conversation and their overall progress in the game. And our aim here is to pick the best director's note for any turn of conversation. We feed that into the language model to sort of infuse it with the player's input, the question that the player has asked the character, and generate that next line of dialogue that's delivered in the game. So how does this pan out in the real world? Well, we recorded a short playthrough this morning, which I'm going to play for you now.
Right. Did you love your husband?
Of course I loved him. He was my partner, my collaborator. How could you even ask that? This is unbearable, knowing he met such a tragic end, and here I am being questioned like a criminal. This is a nightmare. Till death do us part, indeed. What a twisted escape clause that turned out to be. If they only knew the weight of the secrets I'm carrying, the sickening truth behind our vows.
Can you tell me about a happy memory you had with your husband?
A happy memory. I recall a time when Titus and I went to the seaside just after our engagement. I remember him watching the people sleeping rough outside our hotel. He told me they were invisible to most people. I admired his seeming kindness. I thought we were kindred spirits, fighting for a better future. That seaside trip, his interest in those people, I saw it as compassion. But now that memory is tainted with the grotesque reality of his actions. And what does that make me? Part of me wonders if this madness, this darkness, it was always there, lurking behind the passion we shared. Perhaps murdering him was all part of the same madness.
When did your relationship with Titus start to go off?
Our relationship became strained over time, not uncommon for those in high-stress situations. Titus had his secrets, yes, but I thought we shared a dream. We were going to change the world together with our factory. It's heartbreaking to think of what's become of us, of him. Can we please focus on finding who did this to him? The irony is not lost on me. We were indeed madly in love, crafting what was to be the ultimate robotic factory. A dream, our dream, now a nightmare entwined with death. And here I am, weaving lies, dancing around the truth of what I've done. I must tread carefully, for I am as much on the edge as I was that morning.
Titus's body was found at the factory. Do you have any idea how he might have died there?
Titus's body was found at the factory. This is just too much. I can't comprehend. How is this possible? He left for work. I was still in bed. I didn't see him leave, but that's all I know. Who could have done such a thing? This is like being in a nightmare where every word could be a trap. I must appear shocked, innocent. They wouldn't understand the choices I've had to make. They're ignorant of the complexities of my work, of what I've been through with Titus. It's like explaining quantum physics to a child. I need to maintain this facade of the bewildered widow. It's the only way to keep them from seeing the truth.
Is there any reason that someone like Titus might deserve to be killed? Could it be a form of justice?
Deserve to be killed? What a ghastly suggestion. Titus was a complicated man, but he didn't deserve such a barbaric end. I can't even fathom the kind of justice that would justify such an act. I mean, we all have our discrepancies, but that's just... Who found him, by the way? How did they even recognize? Justice. Could they know about the factory, about what he did? No, stay calm, Lucia. But who found him? It's haunting me. The way Titus looked up at me like a confused child before the pain kicked in. I can't shake it off. I must steer clear of these thoughts or I'll betray myself.
Cool. So, can it be shipped and good? Where we're at with Dead Meat is we are in a place of optimism and confidence that both of these things can be delivered against. And this makeup that we're building together with the foundational layer from NVIDIA, plus our game conscious layer, plus the new conversation director piece, really give us confidence that we can deliver something that is really exciting and really powerful and delivers on the promise that we've set out for ourselves of creating a new genre. But in order to make something that is shippable and good, what it requires is for you not to put your faith in the power of AI to solve your problems for you. Instead, what you must do is give the author more opportunities to take their strong arm and direct the story in the ways that they want to direct the story. Because the reality is, everyone talks about AI like it's magic. And to be fair on AI, it is a kind of magic, but it's absolutely not this kind of magic. It is not an innate, godlike, Gandalf, otherworldly, beyond the mortal mind of comprehension kind of magic. Instead, what it is this kind of magic. It is a magician's trick, where the effect of that trick is directly proportional to the human effort that goes into it behind the scenes. It is the preparation, it is the sleight of hand, it is the artistry, and it is the showmanship that, taken together, can create an AI-powered experience that will truly wow audiences. Thank you very much. We have been Meaning Machine. Yes, sir.
Hi. Thank you so much for the talk. It's really great to hear some optimism in the AI in games field. I think we all want it to work in a way that's beneficial for the industry and have people have creative freedom. So thank you so much, especially as somebody who also has a game in this field. Go buy Millennium Whisper on Steam right now. I'm so sorry, guys. You can bollock me later. My question was, as somebody who was working in this field with AI integrated into a video game, I found the testing phases and the testing loops, especially as you're iterating on different factors of the game, can be quite difficult and quite time consuming. Have you found there to be any sort of, especially on a budget, ways that you can optimize that loop and kind of get to see what's wrong and what's better after you've made a change?
Yeah, I mean, from a technology point of view, we touched on that iterative process of using both powerful cloud LLMs to evaluate some of the dialogue that's being generated and also the human evaluation. So we use those repeatedly all the time in an automatic fashion and a manual fashion to inform the decisions we make next, on a weekly basis. I mean, in terms of getting efficiency in that, I guess it's as automated as it can be in order to generate, results that we can actually use. I mean, we do feed those results back into the training process, etc. as well.
I think there also aren't really any shortcuts. I think in the end, like making a good game is really hard, and telling a good story is really hard, and it will be just as painful to make a good game using large language models as it is to make a good game not using them. So absolutely, automated evaluation is really valuable, and it is obviously very funny that QA is a very complicated space where theoretically you could get new things emerging. One thing we found about Conversation Director is you get a lot more control. You know, I think, you know, there's nothing scarier than pressing play and hoping. There's nothing scarier than being like, I really hope this game is good. I really hope it does something interesting. Because that's not the way we want to design something, not the way we want to play something. So, yeah, Conversation Director for us has been an unlock in terms of feeling confident about the story we're putting into our game.
Yeah, I think it's a very good thing to kind of let known at this early point that when you release a game with AI in it, and then people are playing it and streaming it, and you're sat there on the other side like, please don't say something bad. You want that control, definitely. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the use of the Conversation Director for this type of thing, I think, is fantastic. And I was really curious. I know it can be kind of challenging to quantify things like intensity as far as the experience goes, and possibly like the progression if the conversations are fluid enough that they're kind of going backwards and forwards. And I was wondering if you would be kind enough to kind of share with us from kind of a higher level sort of what some of your metrics were for gauging some of those things.
I think, yeah, I mean, the truth is our metric is the human eye of what's good. You know, I think with all these things is, you know, when we're trying to craft a story and try and craft a conversation, we do our best possible estimate of what it will look like and feel like, right? And then you play it and you go, oh, that wasn't very good. That's not how it should be. And then you tweak it and you play it again. And you know, it's funny because even though it's LLMs and even though it's technology, the creative process is still core to this. It's still in the end going to have to be just down to you as to whether you like what you're getting at the end. You just got to keep playing it and keep tweaking it until you like the thing you're making.
All right, thanks so much.
So I actually have like a more game design question regarding it. So I see that in your thing itself, when you're asking it questions and the characters answering your things, there's also a segment where you're reading their minds. So I was like a little curious about it because like a lot of times, like, doesn't it end up betraying the same thing that you were trying to not happen in the first place, which was revealing like a future plot point much earlier on? Because like if you're reading their mind, then essentially you kind of have that indirectly like being fed to you. Was there a reason why you chose that design direction, or like I just want to know about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. The mind reader is designed to be the way that the plot is revealed, because obviously, you know, in interrogation, they are obviously going to be blocking and frustrating you as the interrogator. The difference now is that we have control over what is revealed in the mind reader. So, for example, that play session you just saw, I mean, the funny thing is you guys all know the story of Lucia's case, because I basically told you all that she gets turned into a burger and whatever. So that case is ruined for you. Luckily, there are 20 others in the game. But yeah, I think that what it's about controlling the pace of those reveals. And actually, you know, we want the reveals. We just want to make sure that they're being uncovered at the right pace in a way that is satisfying and rewards the player.
Was there ever a point where these questions were like meant to be limited? Like maybe set number of questions, and then if you don't figure it out by then it's over?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing, one thing we haven't shown here is how you solve the case, right?
I see.
So the way you solve the case is, it's a bit like Rise of the Golden Idol, where you have to fill out a kind of a detailed picture of how the story worked. So it's not just like Tice got killed by Lucia. The reality is you go into that interrogation room with every suspect knowing that they killed them. They killed them. There's no question of it. It's about what happened. What's the story that led to that? What was the motivation? What was the kind of the arc that basically unfurled?
Thank you so much.
Hi there. First of all, great talk. It was really, really interesting to hear. So since you started this project quite a while ago, how have you been keeping up to date with maybe new advancements in technology, newer models, maybe improvements in maybe speech recognition and the text-to-speech side of things. Do you have like evaluations for like when a new model comes out or when something happens? Do you have ways to maybe hot swap, test what is better, what is worse? That's like my first question.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we kind of went into this knowing that, well, not knowing exactly what model we would use and knowing that the model landscape would very much change. And as you see, we've gone from cloud-based LLMs to SLMs and back and forth and in the middle. We built this with an architecture that allows us to drop in and out different models. And that automated evaluation that I spoke about is something we can easily run against different models, replay lots of conversations and assess that both with human eye and empirically to try and evaluate, how they're performing and what they're doing. So absolutely. It's part of the process and needs to be so.
Yeah, great. And I guess maybe a follow-up on that. So I don't know, or if you're able to talk a lot about like maybe the technical side of things, but I guess traditionally there was always this like speech recognition to LLM to TTS approach. But I guess nowadays models are becoming significantly more multimodal, much better audio in, audio out architectures are being released. Like one from, I guess, Sesame AI was released like a couple like week or two ago when they open sourced it. And do you have mechanisms in place to essentially switch out the entire architecture, or are you quite limited to what was chosen when you started the design process?
Probably something in the middle. We certainly have an architecture where we can drop in and out different components. And indeed, in the team at Meaning Machine, we're developing this technology and exploring this technology all the time. So, we've got experiments and prototypes that use streaming audio and streaming dialogue, etc. So I think we went into this whole thing expecting to need to be flexible because everything's moving at such a fast pace. And as you say, like really excited by Sesame and the opportunity to try that, and we will inevitably be trying that in the near future.
Awesome. And then a final question. I just want to ask, for the model you were showcasing, I believe it was Minitron 8B, have you found that maybe what kind of model range are you looking at? Is 8B, because I would imagine maybe some form of quantization to get it really low on device, but maybe 4 to 8 gigabytes of download size for a user. Like, where is the range that you've found that it completely you cannot use these kinds of models at like a 1B range, 500 million parameter range? Like, where is the range, I guess, and that you maybe seen in your experience?
We're talking about dead meat, I suppose, because I think it will be different for a different application, different games, different mechanics. Talking about dead meat, I think for us the 8B is kind of the lowest that we can go to get the kind of performance that you saw in those demo videos. We're also really interested in slightly sort of medium-sized models that could be quantized to still fit on a powerful GPU, and that's something that we're exploring as well. Okay. So it's probably sort of in that range of the 8 to maybe a quantized like 70B or something like that.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. I have questions about, I guess, the pipeline that you had earlier for the very first iteration of how the model worked. You showed us a picture of the generation from Cloud LLM to Meaning Machines, game-conscious AI, to eventually to the game itself. And then later on, you iterated on that and made Meaning Machines, game-conscious AI beefed up. What was the first iteration of Meaning Machines game-conscious AI? What did that look like, and how did it change? Oh, you showed us how it changed, but what did it look like at first? I don't know if you can share that either.
It depends when you are. The very first version looked like I was opening the computer and typing in "Hello World," right? I mean, depends when you do the screenshot.
I'm also trying to cast my mind back to the first.
We could have why don't we tell afterwards? We'll tell you the full development process.
Yeah. For sure. And then my last question was, during the process of trying to improve upon the machine and looking back at what the outputs were, you did a bit of an LLM evaluating the output from the SLM. From what I understand of machine learning, I feel like that's supposed to be a general faux pas / there should be concerns about that. What did you do to combat those concerns, if there were any?
Yeah, I think the quick answer, because I know got nearly no time, is that we used it to just get a sort of high-level view on whether the dialogue was roughly aligned. So we can replay conversations. So we can re-input dialogue and see what happens with a variety of models or whatever. So just to see what that kind of output looked like compared to our high-quality bar. So we weren't solely relying on it. And as Thomas highlighted, the writers were reviewing the game and all of the dialogue as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that's time.
Yeah. Please fill out your forms. Thank you so much for coming. We can do questions either down here or in the wrap-up room, I think, around the corner. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.